Hello everybody and welcome to another book review. This is a book I was so excited to read. When I bought it, I was just so excited about it, and we will take some time to appreciate just the beauty of this book, which was one of the main reasons that I bought it. And wow, I read this on my vacation and I'm still pretty flabbergasted by it. It was not what I expected in any way, shape or form. And that book is The Kingdom of Little Wounds by Susann Cokal. This was actually a Prince Honor book of last year. Obviously I got it before then because there's no little silver prince sticker on here. Now, before we even talk about this book, I mentioned we were going to discuss how pretty it is. First off, this cover is beautiful. Let's take a moment. And then to continue, it has these beautiful maroon-lined pages, or I guess that's a maroon. Would you call that maroon? I'm going to call it maroon. Beautiful maroon-lined pages. And when it's naked, its spine is gorgeous. It's designed to look like an old book, which I think is so clever. But it doesn't stop there. The book opens, you've got a crest here to reflect kind of the royal house. There are little vignettes before each chapter that are set this way, just like an old text. Each section is divided out this way, and then often chapters are started with those ornate first letters, again, just like an old text. There's something about little details like that I love in books. It just shows that a lot of thought went into the actual physical binding of this book, and that someone actually cared to make sure that this really looked good. But obviously, books are not all just about how they look. You have to enjoy what's on the inside. And I really enjoyed this book. This is a particularly mature book, which you will find out in young adult, but I'm firmly convinced you could just shelve an adult fiction and nobody would know the difference. Seriously. This takes place in the Scandinavian city, castle, kingdom of Skyggehavn, which doesn't look anything like the way it's spelled. And thankfully, Miss Cokal provides a how do you say this little bit in the back, which is how I know how to say it, because I was forever pronouncing this wrong in my head the whole time I read it, but whatever. And this is a historical fiction novel about the plague. In this case, it's not the Black Death, it's actually syphilis. We know there's going to be some very heavy themes there already. Syphilis is a particularly nasty venereal venal disease, and there's really only one way you get it. About that. There's a lot of mature content in this book. Not always graphic mature content, but there is abuse, there's rape, there is a lot of really horrific deaths, there's madness, there's oh goodness, there is so much going on here, and as I said, I'm almost speechless. This is incredible. If we are shelving this in YA fiction, this is touching on so many things that I think YA writers can often be really afraid to breach for fear that they go too far. And I think Susann Cokal's background as an adult fiction writer, I believe she's published 2 books before this one, and they were both shelved out in adult. And actually, I think they're both plague novels too. She's the thing about plague novels. I'm totally okay with that though. I think that background actually does her a lot of good in this case, because I don't feel like this was written in the YA bubble. Now, the YA bubble I know is often referred to booktube and the fact that a lot of us all just read YA and we kind of get stuck into YA. I'm talking about the YA bubble more in the respect that you temper what you're writing because you're afraid it's inappropriate for the age demographic that you're writing for. Because you're writing for a very specific age and very specific demographic, and you don't want to break away for fear that you then lose your audience. I think Miss Cokal just sort of had a story she wanted to tell and told it kind of damn whatever your age range is. This book is amazing. The characters are super memorable. We follow 3 characters predominantly through the whole story. We eventually get a 4th who kind of slips in for a little bit, and that is Ava Bingen? I don't know how to pronounce this last name. Ava, who's a seamstress who gets demoted in the very first chapter down to just a nursery scullery maid. She's got basically nothing at that point. We have Midi Sorte, who is the chief, like, nursemaid in the nursery. She is an African, and she's a slave, essentially, and she's mute. We found out, actually, that her tongue is, like, split down the middle, so she can't talk. Oh, the image of that is so grotesque. But she's a fairly interesting character. We then also have the character of the Queen of Skyggehavn. Ha! I remembered it! And we follow her as we learn that there's this kind of royal disease. Obviously it's syphilis, and it only seems to be attacking the royal family. All the children are dying from it, and it seems like the king and queen are being afflicted with something. Actually, I lied. At some point we also do follow the king. This is very much in the style of Game of Thrones in that we are reading point of views. Each chapter is a different point of view. What's really great is it obviously will tell you whose point of view you're reading. So if you are familiar with that style of The Song of Ice and Fire, then you're going to be fine with this book. While I said the characters are extremely memorable, and the plot is actually doesn't really feel that much like a plot per se when you're reading it. There's no real, like, ooh, massive overarching story. It's much more about the characters and this world and touching upon themes of inequality and the abuse of women. At the end of the day, this is a book about women in a world where they had really no power, or who are often heavily subjugated and abused by men. And all these women have their way of trying to exert power and of trying to break free of this system. It sometimes has very sad consequences, and in other cases it works out really well, but it's a phenomenal book about women. Not to say that the man characters are all bad. The male characters are just as interesting. Some of them are totally despicable, but they're still interesting. This is a book I've seen a couple people haul just because it is very pretty. I mean, oh goodness, this book is so pretty. But the content. This is a book that's mesmerizing. It's hypnotic, it sucks you in, it doesn't let go, and it does not shy away from the very dark elements that are in it. And what's interesting is it's not fantasy dark elements. I'm used to reading a lot of fantasy, the dark elements, so it's always fantastical. This is so brutally real in the horrible things that happen to most of these characters that I was just emotionally like that for a lot of the book. It is a phenomenal book, and I highly recommend that you read this just because it deserves to be read, because the things that it touches on and the things that it deals with and the deftness with which Miss Cokal deals with all these themes, this deserves to be read for those things. Yeah. But that is all for me tonight, you guys, and so until next time, cheers.